DS 49, Section 4, Box 17, Monthly Household Income. That's the one that matters. Everything else on the form, address, family composition, disability status, construction materials of the dwelling, all of that feeds into the score, but box 17 is where it starts. 31 years, 9,142 applications. I processed them all. I trained 14 analysts. I wrote the regional manual for the Santiago Metropolitan Office, 63 pages. And in the 2018 revision, they took my name off the cover. I don't know why I mention that. It doesn't matter. Box 17 is the most important number. In October 2021, I filled one out for myself. It's raining. It rains most days here. Valdivia. I've been here, I don't count exactly, since November 2021, so over 4 years. The rain hits the corrugated iron roof, and it makes a sound that I think about more than I should. Not because it means something. I don't know what it means exactly. But it's the first thing in years that didn't require anything from me. I get up at 6, I make tea in the kitchen. Senora Huenolaf lets me use it before the family is up, but after 9 at night, it's theirs. She's maybe 70, I've never asked. She's the only person here whose exact age I don't know, and it bothers me in a way that doesn't make sense. The kettle is old, one of those stovetop ones, and it whistles when the water is ready. A thin whistle, not loud. I pour the water and I take the cup back to my room. 11 square meters. A single bed, a small table, 2 plastic chairs. The window faces the orchard. In the mornings, the torcaza pigeons are in the trees. They make a low sound, round, like a question that nobody needs to answer. The rent is 90,000 pesos a month. My pension is 190,000. So, that leaves 100,000 for everything else. Food, the bus into town, the phone. The stipend from the Hogar adds 15,000. I do the arithmetic every month. I have always done arithmetic. That's what I'm good at. That's what I was good at. The numbers don't change much. They don't need to. I know what they'll say before I sit down to add them. The DS-49 was modified in 2001. Before that, Section 4 had 6 boxes. After the modification, 8. They added box 17, monthly household income, as a separate declaration, and box 18, which was a verification field for cross-referencing with the SII tax database. I remember the week they rolled out the new version because half the regional offices kept using the old forms for 3 months, and every application had to be reprocessed. I was 39. I had been at Minvu for 11 years. I processed the corrections for Santiago myself. 712 applications. I keep a notebook, Minvu logo, lined. The last one I took from the supply cabinet the day I left, October 2021. On the first page, there's one line crossed out. It says DS49, Casilla 17. I crossed it out and I never wrote anything else. It sits on the table next to my mug. The mug has a chip on the rim. I drink from the other side. On this jacket, this one, the green one, there's a metal clip on the zipper. It's from a Minvu lanyard, the kind they gave us for the ID badge. I took the badge off. I kept the clip. I don't know why. It's small, stainless steel, a little scratched. If you didn't know what it was, you'd think it was nothing. And it is nothing, but I kept it. Rodrigo is my brother, 58. In 2011, he called me on a Sunday. I remember the Sunday because I was ironing a blouse for Monday, a white one with a collar that never sat right. And the phone rang and I put the iron down and I picked up and he said, "Rosa, I have a situation." He owed money, gambling. He didn't say gambling at first, he said a situation. And I said, "How much?" And he said 8,200,000 pesos. CLP 8.2 million. I didn't say anything for a while. He was breathing on the other end. He said, "I know it's a lot." I said, "I'll figure it out." I took a personal loan. The bank approved it because I had a government salary, 30 years of steady employment, no prior debt. The loan officer didn't ask what it was for. I gave Rodrigo the money in a bank transfer the following Tuesday. He repaid 1 million over 4 years in small amounts, 50,000 here, 80,000 there, and then he stopped. He didn't say he was stopping, he just stopped, like it slipped his mind. Maybe it did slip his mind. I never called him about it. I don't know why I didn't. I could have. I had his number. I just didn't. I walk along the Rio Crucis in the morning, 7 to 9, sometimes later if the rain is light. The river is slow and brown and wide. There's a path that goes along the bank for about 3 kilometers before it turns into mud and you have to go back. I walk the whole thing and turn around. Sometimes I see a man fishing. We don't talk. Once he nodded and I nodded back. That was in my first year here. He still comes. We still don't talk. That's fine. In the afternoons, I go to the Hogar de Transito. It's an NGO. They process government documents for migrants and elderly who can't do it themselves. I help with that. They pay me 15,000 pesos a month, it's a stipend. Last Tuesday, a woman came in, Sebastiana Riquelme, 52, from Temuco. She needed 4 forms processed: housing subsidy, pension verification, health insurance renewal, and a municipal certificate. I did all 4. It took an hour and 40 minutes. She didn't say thank you. She said, "You know how to do this." I said yes. There's a man there too, Bernardo, 69, retired teacher from Osorno. He volunteers 3 afternoons a week. He talks about his grandchildren, and I listen. He has 4. He knows their shoe sizes and their favorite foods and which one is afraid of dogs. He asked me once if I had children, and I said no, and he said, ah, and that was it. He didn't ask why. Some people do that. They ask the next question and the next one, and they keep going until you've told them something you didn't want to say. Bernardo doesn't do that. He says, ah, and then he tells me about his granddaughter's school play. I appreciate that more than he knows. Carmen is my sister, 60 now. In 2015, her husband had a transport business, small, 2 trucks. It was failing. She called me, not on a Sunday, a Wednesday, during my lunch break. She needed a co-signer for a commercial loan, 14 million pesos, CLP 14 million. I signed as guarantor. That's Section 6, Box 3, Declaration of Assets. You list everything and you sign at the bottom, and it becomes someone else's problem that is also your problem. I signed. The business defaulted in 2016, March. I got a letter from the bank on a Monday. I read it at my desk at Minvu during lunch. The language was very clear. I know that language. I've read thousands of official letters. Guarantor liability, outstanding balance, collection proceedings. My savings. I had savings then, not much, but I had been careful for 25 years. A little bit every month into a separate account that I didn't touch. It was meant for, I don't know what it was meant for exactly. Something. A future that was shaped like a number I could control. They were gone in 4 months. Carmen called once after. A short call, maybe 3 minutes. She said, I'm sorry, Rosa, it's fine. We'll figure it out. That was the whole call. It's fine. She said, it's fine. I said, it's fine too. We both said, it's fine. And then we didn't talk about it again. I'm not angry. That's the part I don't understand. I should be. I know that. I've processed 9,000 applications from people who have less than I had and more reason to be angry. And some of them were angry. You could see it in the handwriting, in the way they pressed the pen into box 17. And I understood that, but I don't feel it. I feel something else. Not sadness, not peace, more like when you finish counting a very long column of numbers and you double check and the total is the same both times and you just sit there. The answer is correct. There's nothing to do with it.
CLP 8.2 million, 2011.
CLP 14 million, 2015-2016.
CLP 7.8 million, 2019. That's 30.0 million pesos. I know that number by heart. I have never said it out loud. Felipe is my youngest brother, 55. In April 2019, he was diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma. He called me from the hospital. I could hear the machines. He said, Rosa, I need help with the treatment. The part FONASA doesn't cover.
7,800,000 pesos. CLP, 7.8 million. I went to the AFP, the pension fund, and I filed for early withdrawal. There's a penalty, 40%, between the penalty and the tax. I knew that. I had processed documents for people who had done the same thing. I knew exactly what it meant for the pension I would receive when I turned 61. I signed. That's what I did. You fill in the boxes and you sign. Felipe recovered. The chemotherapy worked. He called me in January 2020. He said, "It's over, Rosa." He meant the treatment. His voice sounded like his voice again, not the hospital voice, the voice I remembered from before. I was happy. I am still happy about that. That's true. He's alive. He's 55 and he's alive, and he teaches swimming to children at a municipal pool in Rancagua. He never mentioned the amount, not then, not later. I don't think he knows what 7,800,000 pesos did to my pension. Or maybe he knows and he thinks, I don't know what he thinks. I didn't ask. I never ask. That's the thing. I never ask. In September 2020, there was a performance review. We had them once a year. You sit in the director's office and he reads from a form, a different form, not DS-49, an internal one. And he tells you what your rating is, and you sign it. Director Contreras, he was 51, newer than me by 15 years, a good administrator, efficient, polite. He said I was invaluable. He used that word, invaluable. He said the office couldn't function without my institutional knowledge. He said something about succession planning, about training the next generation, about how rare it was to find someone with my level of dedication. My hands were shaking, and I put them under the table. I pressed them flat against my thighs. He was still talking. I was thinking about box 17, my box 17, what it would say when I retired. 190,000 pesos, after 40% penalty on the AFP withdrawal, after the personal loan payments, after 31 years. He didn't notice my hands. Nobody noticed. Why would they? I was the senior analyst. I had trained 14 people. I had written the manual. The manual didn't have my name on it anymore, but I had written it. Every page. 63 pages. I could still recite the table of contents from memory if you asked me. When I was 22, I became the person in the family who could handle things. I don't remember deciding this. I think it happened because I was the one who got the government job, the stable one, the one with a salary that came on the same day every month. And once you're that person, once they know you're that person, the phone rings and you already know why. You don't even have to ask. You just say how much. I think I signed something then. Nobody gave me a form. I signed anyway. The morning I left Santiago, October 2021, a Thursday, I sat at my desk at Minvu. I had been there since 7:30. The office was still quiet. I opened my drawer and I took out a blank DS-49 form. I had thousands of them. I had processed thousands. I turned it over and I looked at it the way I had looked at 9,142 of them. Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, Family Composition, 1. Section 4, Box 17, Monthly Household Income. I wrote CLP 189,000. I checked the scoring matrix. I ran the numbers the way I had run them for 31 years. I qualified for social housing. I had administered this program for 31 years. I qualified. I sat there for a while. I touched the clip on my jacket, the lanyard clip, the metal one, and I felt the scratch on the surface with my thumb. Then I put the form in my bag. I don't know why. I could have thrown it away. I put it in my bag. That afternoon, I booked a bus to Valdivia. I chose Valdivia because I don't have a good reason. I had been once in 2003 for a regional training. I remembered the river and the rain. I remembered that it felt far from Santiago without being far in kilometers. 14 hours by bus. I booked a seat by the window. I packed one bag, this jacket, 2 notebooks, one blank, one the Minvu one, some clothes, not many. I left my apartment key under the doormat. I didn't leave a note. I didn't call anyone. I thought about calling Carmen or Rodrigo or Felipe, and then I thought, they'll know I'm gone when they need something and I don't answer. And then I picked up the bag and I walked to the bus terminal. The bus left at 11 at night. I sat in my seat and I watched Santiago disappear through the window. The lights thinning, then the dark, then the fields. I didn't sleep. I watched the dark and I counted. Not anything specific, just the habit of counting. Kilometers, hours, pesos. The numbers I had carried for 31 years. They were still there in my head, and they weren't going anywhere, but I was. My phone battery is always full by evening. I charge it at night, and by the time I go to the Hogar de Tránsito, it's at 90-something%, and when I come back, it's still at 90-something%. It's a small phone. The battery should last, and it does. It lasts all day. The library here is small. 2 rooms, wooden shelves, a smell of damp paper that I like. The woman at the desk, I don't know her name. She has never told me, and I have never asked. She gave me a card on my 3rd week in Valdivia, a library card. my name, and a number. I've had many cards with my name and a number. This one doesn't require anything except that I return the book. I borrowed a book about the Valdivian temperate rainforest, trees, birds, rainfall patterns. I read about the coihu, how it grows for hundreds of years in the same place, how its wood is hard and dark, how it drops its leaves gradually so you never see it bare. I kept the book for 7 weeks. The fine was 1,400 pesos. CLP 1,400. I paid it, and she wrote the date in a little ledger with a pencil. That was a manageable problem. 1,400 pesos. You can hold that number in your hand. You can pay it, and it's done, and nobody calls you about it later. The chukao is a bird, brown, small, loud. In the mornings, it calls from somewhere in the ulmo trees, and you can't see it. The Mapuche say if a chukao calls from your right, the day will be good. I don't believe that, but I notice which side it calls from. Every morning I notice. Sometimes at the river there's a black woodpecker, big red crest. It hits the coihu trunks and the sound carries across the water. I stood once for 20 minutes watching one. I was late to the hogar. Bernardo said, "You're late." And I said, "I was watching a bird." And he said, "Which one?" And I told him, and he nodded like that was a reasonable thing. This morning the rain almost stopped, not completely. There were still drops on the corrugated iron, slow, like someone tapping with one finger. I looked out the window. There's a tree in the orchard, I don't know what kind, that has a pale scar on the trunk where a branch broke off. The water drops were sitting on the lower branches, not falling, just sitting there. I sat at the small table. The Minvu notebook was there, the one with the crossed-out line, the mug with the chip, the library book face down. I didn't open anything. I didn't write anything. I sat there and I listened to the drops on the iron, and I looked at the tree with the scar and the water on the branches. That was this morning. That was enough.